Today, our topic, our biblical study topic, is going to be on the origin of comets, asteroids, and TNOs, as it pertains to the Bible, as it pertains to the scriptures, both prophetic scriptures and things that have happened in the past. And again, as I said, this is going to be a presentation this coming Tuesday, February 15th, in the Twin Cities. And we're doing it here for the church. And so this presentation is going to be based on a theory that was proposed by Dr. Walt Brown, PhD, mechanical engineering, MIT mechanical engineer, West Point Army Ranger, associate professor of the Air Force Academy, retired Air Force colonel, all that to say, he's not dumb. And he... And the way he came into my life about 25 years ago was that I had become a Christian from an evolutionary mindset. I was a pagan, raised in, never learned creation. Thought we evolved because that's what they taught us at school. And then as soon as I became a Christian, I realized the Word of God was the truth. I just go, wow, this is the truth. And I start reading it, creation. I can remember the first week I got saved and I got my Bible. And I read Genesis 1, just immediately, I was overwhelmed with the Spirit of God. I thought, wow, I've been lied to. God just breathed the creation into existence. I just knew that was true. Which the world thinks we're a bunch of crazies for believing that. But you know what? The more and more they look under, the more and more they get into using microscopes that can get down to an atom, and to find out what's inside of a cell and everything, all these things they used to believe when there weren't these tools, they realize more and more, man, how did DNA evolve? How can an amoeba become a man? Better yet, how can goo turn into an amoeba? And all this other stuff, there's all this scientific evidence that supports we were created. And there's evidence to support there was a flood of Noah. But I was struggling because I'm reading, and then I get to the flood, and I go, wow. I know I saw seashell fossils that I kicked over at Red Rocks Amphitheater area in Red Rocks outside of west of Denver. And I remember kicking it over as a pagan kid, and I go, man, how did a seashell fossil get up here? Down there is the Mile High City, and up here is, wow. And then, because I had heard about the flood, and I go, maybe that Bible story is right, but just moved on, because how in the world where could the water come from, and where did the water go? And there is no, you can go to the AIG Museum, or you can go to ICR's museum, and you can read books by ICR and AIG, and they will not give you the answer to where the water came from and where it went to flood the entire world. But you can read Dr. Walt Brown's material, and you get a very good understanding of where the water came from and where it went, which we're not going to cover all the details of that because we're on a different topic here today. But when a friend of mine from nuclear submarine days, I told him, I said, Kent, if you ever find out an answer to that question, where the water come from, where it go, you got something that's scientific and makes sense, you let me know. And he gave me the book, and he gave me Dr. Brown's book. He found it first, gave it to me. And then, 25 years of studying, talking to Dr. Brown, working together on projects and stuff, absolutely convinced. Absolutely convinced. All the evidence in this planet of ours and in the solar system points to this being the truth. And we'll look into it. So comets, what are they? How many people were around when Hale-Bopp came by 25 years ago? Remember that? So everybody 25 years, less than 25, well, you have to be a little bit more than 25 because most babies didn't probably notice, but Hale-Bopp was around for 18 months with a big comet tail. And the difference between a comet and an asteroid is a comet has a tail, meaning it has gases that come off and then spread fine particle into space from the solar wind pushing when it gets close to the sun, and it gives this tail. And asteroids don't have a tail. They don't have any volatiles on them that when they get close to the sun, they send off the comet tail, which, by the way, can go for millions of miles in space. So asteroids are floating rocks, rock piles, actually, and TNOs are out past. TNO is a trans-Neptunian object, and Neptune it means an object that's past the orbital path of Neptune. That's what that means. So comets, why do they have their tails? And this is a internet dictionary, a celestial object consisting of a nucleus of ice and dust, and when near the sun, a tail of gas and dust particles pointing away from the sun. Comet tail forms as it nears the sun. So when it gets close to the sun, if it's water that's on the comet, the water will start vaporizing and pushing debris away from the comet. And as the vapor pushes away the debris, then the sun hits it, the sunlight hits that and gives that tail portion. And it's very, very fine dust. And you can see the direction here is counterclockwise. And so when it's way out in space, when you get to the top of that elliptical orbit, which is, it can be almost way past Pluto. It can be way past the planets of our solar system. You could walk as fast as it's traveling. But when it comes down, then the sun finally grabs it and then starts bringing it down and accelerates all the rest of the time down the down the left side of that elliptical orbit. It's getting faster and faster and faster to where it can be going tens of thousands of miles a second in miles an hour when it gets close to the sun. And then it brightens in the sky. Hale-Bopp was bright for 18 months. You could see, with the naked eye, you could see Hale-Bopp. Always radiates away from the sun, diminishes as it leaves. So, asteroids. Now, see all those, how many people here were aware that each one of those little white specks is an asteroid? And actually the green ones are too. And so they're between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter primarily, and each one of those has a potential of someday being kicked into our Earth's path. So, and it's called the asteroid belt. There's about 1 to 2 million asteroids greater than 0.6 miles in diameter found in the asteroid belt. So how did they get there? Where did they come from? That's what we're going to be talking about. Others are in elliptical orbits around the sun and cross the orbital path of the planets. That's probably not good, right? We're going to talk about that too. So some of these things are not in that circular orbit in that area between Mars and Jupiter. And those green ones are locked into a gravitational place that I tried to talk about it last Sunday night, and they said, you can skip that. So I'm going to skip that, but it's, except to say this, that the fact that there are that population of those green asteroids before and after the orbit of Jupiter, that in itself testifies to the fact that asteroids were birthed inside of our solar system and they spun out. They went out from an inner solar system by the laws of orbital mechanics, which, by the way, I used to have a real job before being a pastor. And I was in the nuclear Navy and went to the shipyard and had engineering physics courses at Olympic College, et cetera. I forgot to mention that. Because people can say, what is the pastor talking about this for? Well, I did have some engineering. And so TNOs, trans-Neptunian objects, again, there's a bunch of these guys, 70,000 trans-Neptunian objects that they found so far. They only recently even found what's called the Kuiper Belt. They only recently have gotten telescopes powerful enough to realize, wow, there's a bunch of mass out past Neptune in this Kuiper Belt. And you'll notice that Pluto, our planet Pluto, is not like the other planets. It's not in a nice circular orbit around the sun like the rest of the planets. It is an elliptical orbit that takes it inside and outside of Neptune's orbit, so even Pluto is a trans-Neptunian object. Part of its time, it's a trans-Neptunian object. And scientists now are saying it's probably a compilation of millions of comets. It's a comet. And so, where do they come from? Where are comets, asteroids? And by the way, the picture of the asteroid is an example, Atakawa. that the Japanese went and visited with their probe. Where do they come from? Does the Bible give us any clues? What do evolutionists say? What do evolutionists say? Now, what do you think the evolutionary premise is for everything in our solar system and galaxies and universe? What's the premise? The Big Bang. And let me just tell you, and this is a public service announcement to all you young people still in school, too. You're going to get given a lie in school. And you're going to think, oh, that professor, how could they be wrong? This is a message for you to realize. When you start out with a lie as your premise that you build your castle on, then it's like building it on the sand. And the science, as the more and more they look into space, the more and more probes, the more things that they do, the more they realize and are starting to admit, even in secular news magazines, putting like, pop goes the bang, that the Big Bang is dead. Now, they don't change the textbooks, they don't change what they have on the Discovery Channel or anything else, because the alternative is what? The alternative of the Big Bang is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they can't go there. They won't go there. So don't be thinking that, man, my parents taught me that God created the whole world in 6 days, and now I go to university and they can prove it was billions of years old, and no, they can't. So just, they know they have a problem, and so just remember that. But what do evolutionists say about the topic at hand, comets, asteroids, TNOs? Well, what I'm going to concentrate on is Dr. Don Brownlee, professor of astronomy at the University of Washington, who was the principal investigator for a $212 million Stardust Space Probe mission. So the purpose of the mission was that there was this Wild 2. It says Wild 2, but it's Wild 2 because it's got a German name to it. There was a Wild 2 comet that was a comet that didn't come into the inner solar system, but it got a gravity boost, and it changed its orbit, and so it was like, oh, this is that pristine. It's never been inside the inside the solar system. We can go send a space probe, and we can get some of that comet tail dust. So when it gets close enough to be making a tail, not that you could see with the naked eye, but it's still making the tail, then because it was still far away, we're going to send a spacecraft, and we're going to catch some of that tail dust, and we're going to bring it back to Earth, open it up in a clean room, and we're going to find out what's inside there. And so he was the University of Washington, he was a principal investigator. So the Stardust Probe successfully flew through the Wild 2 comet tail to collect comet material and returned it to Earth on January 15, 2006. And when you really, if you study how how they got it out there, it's really amazing. 2 trips around the sun for gravity boost, 1 trip around the Earth to get a gravity boost, tens of thousands of miles an hour to go catch the comet, find it, open up the lid on the collector, collect this stuff in aerogel, which was just amazing material, close it up, get it back. It's really, really phenomenal. I mean, it was just amazing that they did this. And I was aware that they were doing this. And so where did he think they came from? Well, it landed, and they opened it in January it landed in January, opened it up, started getting some information. 3 years later, 2009, in January 2006 it landed. 3 years later, he does a 2-page executive summary of what did they find on Stardust. And these are quotes. October 29, 2009, Stardust, a mission with many scientific surprises. Comets are ancient bodies of frozen ice and dust that form beyond the orbit of the most distant planet. They were expected to contain materials that the solar system formed from, preserved in ice for billions of years. Now, it's interesting, he says, comets are this, but we expected them to have everything that's different than what we really thought we knew about comets, as we're going to see. And then he goes, when the international team of 200 scientists began examination of the returned particles, we found that the particles were indeed ancient building blocks of the solar system, but the nature and origin of the particles was quite unexpected. to say the least. And it went on to say, what we found was remarkable. Instead of rocky material that formed around previous generations of stars, we found that most of the comet's rocky matter formed inside our solar system at extremely high temperature. So there were crystalline minerals in the comet tail dust that can only form at thousands of degrees. And they're saying, how in the world does a crystalline mineral, which they would have said was, in fact, he did say, it's impossible that we're going to find any crystalline, crystalline olivine, one of the minerals, most common, very common mineral in Earth's crust. We can't find any crystalline because that takes a high temperature to be able to create, and it's going to be amorphous crystals, and not amorphous materials, compounds, and so he was shocked that we found these things, and I was going to say, at what temperature is the comet out in space? Close to absolute zero. Even when it gets closer to the sun, and see, that's the other thing. It's never been really close to the sun, so we're going to be able to see what it's like, and we're going to see that pristine, basic stuff out there. So even when it gets close to the sun, it's not getting that close. It would be destroyed by the sun if it gets close enough to create these crystalline materials that were there, minerals. So it was very exciting to find pieces of chondrules, thousands of degrees, and olivine in the comet, and the scientific implications of this are profound. They're wrong. Here's the scientific thing. They're wrong about what they said in all the textbooks that are staying. Here it is, umpteen years later. Guaranteed the textbooks haven't been changed. Guaranteed people aren't going to be taught differently in college about what's going on. Scientific implications of this, are profound. When we first presented the discovery, you could see jaws drop in the room crowded with 600 scientists. It was just phenomenal to discover something this profound. This profound because it is not possible for us with our paradigm to explain why we're finding this stuff on a comet. And the finding that inner solar system materials formed at very high temperature were transported all the way to the edge of the solar system to a region where Pluto is one of the major scientific findings of Stardust. That's, he's concluding, this is what we found out, that somehow materials got close to the sun to create these crystalline minerals, and then it got, don't ask me how, how that happened. Then it got transported out into the outer past Pluto, mixed with some water, to come and become comets. They don't have an idea. They don't have a clue. The finding that the inner solar system materials formed at very high, and then I'm going to add my comment, but Dr. Brownlee can't explain how. This is what we found, but we can't explain how it happened. Dr. Brown can explain how it happened, and he does explain, and explained it before Stardust project happened, Space Probe went. Stardust also had a variety of other surprises. One of the most unexpected was the 2009 discovery of the amino acid glycine by a team of scientists from the Goddard Space Flight Center. So now remember, it landed in 2006. And now this is 2009, they went public with it. Why? Because they admitted in other writings, when they found glycine, which is a left-handed amino acid that's basic to all living life, that when they found it, they pointed to Brownlee, primary investigator, you contaminated your space probe. It's not possible that you picked up glycine, the left-hand amino acid, from space, from a comet tail, because that's not possible. And so they spent a bunch of time figuring out and saying, no, there's no way we got contaminated, and there's, they use isotropic analysis too difficult to get into that, and they said, nope, this really happened. 3 years after it landed, they went public with that. And he admitted to me in a phone conversation on August 18, 2009, that he was shocked by this discovery. And I'm going to close with his and my conversation at the end of this. He was genuinely surprised. I mean, like, I've got a problem. And I'm willing to talk to you because I know I got a problem. I mean, he didn't say that, but that was the attitude that he took my call and the conversation that I'll embellish on later on. So now I'm going to shift to a lady named Dee McClellan, and she and I co-conspired together to get an email from Dr. Brown predicting what they would find on Stardust the day before it landed. She was a NASA ambassador, and she was like Sally Ride, who went up on the space shuttle that blew up. She was a school teacher, but she was a school teacher that is looked at and credited with by NASA as, you're one of our ambassadors. And as a result, she was a teacher able to be invited to the clean room when they opened up the space probe for Stardust. And she knew she was going to be there, and she was a Hydroplate Theory fan. She read Dr. Brown's work, knew Dr. Brown, like me, knew what the theory said. Dee was a student of Dr. Walt Brown's Hydroplate Theory and was with Dr. Brownlee in the clean room when they opened the Stardust space capsule. 2 days before the space probe landed, Dee wrote Dr. Walt Brown the following: Dr. Don Brownlee showed a new instrument that will be used to analyze the particles that they bring back, because they're getting close to knowing it's going to be coming back. He stated that the particles from this comet dust would be pristine material from the formation of the solar system. He also stated that the ions would show that this dust would be very different than material from Earth. This difference was not in the elements, but something to do with ions. But my simple way of understanding this is that I expect he will pop one of those particles in that expensive machine and find out it's the same stuff we find on Earth. And this will be very shocking and unexpected. These are words I hear often from NASA researchers. So she predicted, as a school teacher, something that showed, that he was wrong. Dee, the Hydroplate Theory student, was right, and the UW professor was wrong, and still is, because she knew the Hydroplate Theory, and she goes, yeah, they're going to find out that this stuff came from Earth. It's the only explanation. Now, when she says, these are words I hear often from NASA researchers, shocking, unexpected, See, that's even before Stardust gets opened up and they start saying the things that we already read from Dr. Brownlee. There's tons of other stuff, too. Wow, there's an asteroid with a moon around it. Inconceivable. There's an asteroid with 2 moons around it. Inconceivable. All right. Last week they said, we've got an asteroid with 3 moons around it. Inconceivable. And you have to understand orbital physics because an asteroid can't have a moon by the way they think they were formed. Impossible. Inconceivable. How can we have a comet that's a contact binary comet? Inconceivable. How can we have rounded off they called them dinosaur egg rocks, rounded off like river rock, on the 67P comet? Inconceivable. 14 complex organic molecules found on 67P comet after the Stardust program. So what should we say when our professors tell us this stuff? I don't think that word means what you think it means. For those that have been properly discipled. If you don't know why we're laughing, then go talk to somebody laughing, and they'll help you out. And then here's my statement. All evidence from Stardust and other space probes are consistent with Dr. Brown's premise that comets, asteroids, and TNOs formed inside of our solar system when debris and water was ejected from the Earth during the flood of Noah about 5,000 years ago. And I said that to Dr. Brownlee, from the University of Washington, and he did not hang up on me. Dr. Brownlee, you know that everything that we are finding out about comets, asteroids, is consistent with the idea that it was jettisoned from the Earth and went off to go become those orbiting bodies. He didn't hang up on me, we kept talking. What does the Bible say? So before we get there, we're going to look at what does the Bible say? Because there's some people that think comets are part of the creation, and we're going to look at that. So, what does the Bible say about how they originated? Dr. Brown's Hydroplate Theory, and can his theory explain these objects while being consistent with the Bible? So going to Genesis chapter 1, the fourth day of creation, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night for signs and seasons. God created the sun and the moon and the stars for signs and seasons, for days and years, and let them give light on the earth. And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Genesis 1, 14 through 19. So God says, hey, this is good. But there's no mention of comets, asteroids, TNOs. Could they have been created then? It doesn't mention comets, asteroids, but could they have been created then? Some people think the answer is yes. Those people have a problem because, and in fact, when I give this talk via Zoom in 2 days, it's going to be the 9-year anniversary from the Chelyabinsk meteor that blew up over Russia, that came into Earth's atmosphere, unknown to us. We didn't know it was coming. And it came with the power of half a megaton bomb by just its velocity and mass. Just its mass and velocity coming into our atmosphere and turning tens of thousands of miles per hour into thermal energy, burning it up. And how many people remember this when this happened in Russia? Remember that? Shattered thousands of windows. The shock wave that hit in Russia shattered thousands of windows. It partially collapsed this building and did damage to many other buildings. In fact, 7,200 buildings were damaged in 6 cities. And 1,500 people were injured. And here's another public service announcement. If you are in a building and all of a sudden you go, whoa, what's that flash outside? Don't run to the window. Okay? Wait a minute. Make sure the shock wave either from an asteroid or from a nuclear bomb, either one, it's the same thing. Wait for the time for the shock wave to go by before you go look at the window, because most of the, I don't know if most, but many of the people, many of those 1,500 say, what was that? Bam! The shock wave hit and put the glass from the windows into their eyes. So they didn't see this meteor coming. And because of the fear that an extinction-level asteroid could be on the way to Earth someday, billions of dollars are currently being spent by nations all around the world to detect and deflect one before it does hit. There's a recent, a supercomputer program that was just made, just advertised in the media here a couple weeks ago, that because they have to think about the orbits of those million asteroids. And they have to think about at any time this asteroid could bounce, hit in and give a gravity boost to that asteroid, change its orbit, bring it to the Earth. So they're putting a supercomputer to try and analyze the asteroid belt for all million orbits to which one could possibly come out of orbit and hit the Earth. And they're sending millions and millions of dollars on new space telescopes to try and find. They are major in a panic to find ones that have our names, a meteor that has our name on it. And last year, they launched the NASA DART mission for this very purpose. Because there's two things. One, we have to detect them before they hit. They missed the Russian one. They didn't even see that one. And mostly because there was another massive asteroid that was just missing us. And they were paying attention to that and got blindsided by this guy that crashed on the 15th of February. So you have to detect them And then if you see, oh, it's coming and it's going to hit us, then you have to detect them soon enough that you can do something about its orbital path. You have to be able to deflect it so it doesn't run into you. And that's what this DART mission is about. It's a practice session because they found an asteroid that's not going to hit the Earth. And so they're sending this space probe out that's going to crash into the asteroid and change its orbit to see how that works. So if we had one that really is going to head for us, whether or not smashing into it will work. Everybody follow that? Now, a lot of people are hoping that when they smash into it to change the orbit from one that's missing us, it's going to not hit us, and I'm hoping that. So this was launched November 24th, 2021, and it's going to arrive at the asteroid on September 26, 2022. And it's actually, you know what it is? It's an inconceivable binary asteroid. And what they're going to do is they're not going to crash into the mother body asteroid. They're going to crash into its moon. And this is a YouTube animation of this space mission. Oh, and so now we're going to go volume. So I'm going to click one more time here. And so this is the space probe that's going to crash into that moon. By the way, there's no noise in space, but you know. So Didymos is the main body, Dimorphos is the moon. And the DART spacecraft is going to crash in another nation put together this spotter aircraft, and a spotter that wanted to watch it. And so when it hits that, what it's going to do is it's going to slow down the orbit, which is going to bring it closer to the main asteroid. And then the laws of angular momentum between those two bodies will change the orbit of both of those. It's not going to just change the orbit of the moon. It's going to change the orbit of both of them, and they're going to then detect how much they were able to deflect by that mission. So let's go back and summarize here. After the sixth day of creation, then God said everything that he had made, and indeed everything, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. There's 26,115 asteroids that passed near Earth, according to NASA today. They know they're coming close, and they could be diverted, and they're keeping track, like I've said and emphasized. Have any of them ever hit the Earth? Yeah, go down to Arizona, see a big crater. They've hit us before. There's also evidence that they've hit the ocean before, creating mega tsunamis where they see that dirt and debris was shifted in chevron all the way up hundreds of feet up on the hills next to the ocean coast. They know where mega tsunamis have occurred because of an asteroid hit. Are asteroids and meteor impacts a good thing? Are they prophesied to be in our future? Let's think about this too. Could God have created something that is good that then crashes into the earth and has caused devastation and destruction on the earth to people that were living that died when that one hit in Arizona and every place else? You know, that's not good. But he also prophesies there's going to be bad things happening in the future. Then the second angel sounded. This is Revelation. Angel with the trumpet, trumpet judgment on earth. And something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Something that's going to hit the sea. Then a third angel, the third trumpet, right after that. And a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water, and the name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. And I speculate that there's going to be a meteor hit that causes several reactor plants to melt down and cause to go into the water table and to cause people to be drinking their water and dying. I don't know what's going to happen. Wormwood is an ancient, and I checked this out with the Russian embassy, is an ancient name for Chernobyl. So they would be calling it, hey, that Chernobyl asteroid that melted down reactor plants all through Europe or whatever, or someplace, and bittering the water. It's just a speculation. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, and we're going to be up in heaven with Jesus when it does happen, and so he'll tell us all about it. We'll watch it, maybe. So fulfillment of these prophecies might not be that far off because, as I mentioned a few weeks ago in our Bible study, asteroid Apophis will barely miss 20,000 miles away, barely miss Earth on April 13, 2029. Some people are speculating that this is going to be the asteroid that fulfills the prophecies we just read, which means the rapture has to be soon because, that's in the tribulation period, etc. But they have confirmed, at least if we want to believe our government, that it is going to miss us by that much. And it's 1,100 foot in diameter, traveling at 40,000 miles an hour when it reaches near Earth. And the one that blew up over Russia was 56 feet in diameter. Geocentric satellites, we have satellites they stay in the same place over Earth, called geocentric. That's 22,236 miles up. And so this asteroid might take out some satellites in its path when it comes. If it were to hit the Earth, it would release the energy of 1,000 1-megaton bombs. Now, I could have said the energy of a 1,000 megaton bomb, but nobody's ever made a 1,000 megaton bomb. It's, a 1 megaton bomb is a huge hydrogen bomb. It would be devastating. And then this is Jesus himself in the Olivet Discourse, talking about the last days before he returns. And there will be signs in the sun and the moon and in the stars and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, that implies to me, people look at that verse differently than what I'm looking at it, and maybe they're right. But I think they are going to be able to detect one. They are going to see that it's coming. They are going to find out they can't deflect it. There's not enough time to deflect it, or our deflection methods don't work. And then people are going to be told, well, just like the movies, you're done. It's going to hit this country, it's going to hit this area, and it's going to be absolutely catastrophically devastating, and people's hearts will be failing them for the expectation of the things that are coming upon the earth. And it would make this, artist's conception of a tsunami, a mega tsunami hitting a major metropolitan area on the coast, it would make it a reality. How can this be good? By the way, the French word for it, or their word, disaster, is where we get disaster. And it's a combination of two words, which means bad star. So, and you know why? Because throughout all of ancient history, people equated comets to judgment. Now, why? Because, I have to make sure this thing stays plugged in here. Why? Because when the flood of Noah happened, there was thousands of more comets that were ejected than are around today. They would have, shortly after, when people are repopulating the world, there would have been, wow, look at the sky, look at this, look at that, and sometimes they would have been coming down, hitting the earth, hitting other planets, whatever else, and creating, it was judgment that was coming. And so then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good, so the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Clearly, comets and asteroids are not very good, so could not have been part of the original creation. Can we all agree on that? Because they are not good. God could have, just as part of the judgment, just created them because I'm going to use it to bring a judgment in the last days. But I think that there's another explanation. And if Dr. Brownlee of UW is wrong, and comets, asteroids weren't part of the Genesis 1 creation, where did they come from? Does the Bible give us a clue? And it does. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, on that one day, all the fountains of the great deep, now fountains usually means water, right? Fountains of the great deep, and we're going to know Peter makes it perfectly clear what I'm saying is exactly what it's saying here. There was water, when God created the earth, there was a large body of water underneath the crust of the earth. And that water pressurized, the crust broke, and it jettisoned water from that ocean of water underneath the crust up into space and some of it not with a high enough velocity to go to space, came back as global rainfall. Fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were open, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So the windows of heaven were open for some of the stuff to go up into space, and the windows of heaven were open to also start bringing that stuff back down for all the centuries that comets, asteroids have been hitting the earth, and some of it came back down to bury the frozen mammoths. So we're going to now do another. This is from Mike Snavely. Has a video called The Horrors of the Flood that we showed on a Sunday evening service recently. And this is just a few minutes. This is from 4850 to 5210. His entire video was so good. It's such an important video to understand. We're only showing a short part of the animation also, and the full animation is very powerful. So I'm only showing a small part that, and he encouraged me to go ahead and do this. And so here we go with this.
In our view, the most plausible explanation for this entire flood scenario has been proposed by Dr. Walter Brown. He calls it the Hydroplate Theory. Let's have Dr. Brown give us a brief overview of his theory.
We can see on our planet many very strange features that can now be linked together and systematically explained as a result of a cataclysmic global flood whose waters erupted from subterranean chambers with an unimaginable amount of explosive energy. This explanation shows how major mountains formed very quickly. It explains our coal, oil, and methane deposits, rapid continental drift, why we find on the ocean floor huge trenches, hundreds of canyons, and tens of thousands of volcanoes. It explains the formation of the layered strata and almost all fossils, the frozen mammoths, the so-called ice ages, and major land canyons, especially the Grand Canyon. The pre-flood Earth probably had only one very large supercontinent covered with lush vegetation. There were seas and rivers. The mountains were smaller than today, perhaps 5,000 feet high. According to the Hydroplate Theory, about half the water that is now in our oceans was originally contained in interconnected subterranean chambers. This water formed a thin spherical shell at least a mile thick, perhaps 60 miles below the surface of the pre-flood Earth. Increasing pressure in the subterranean water stretched the crust just as a balloon stretches when the pressure inside increases. Failure in the crust began with a microscopic crack which grew in both directions at about 2 miles a second. This crack, following the path of least resistance, encircled the globe in about 3 hours. As the crack raced around the Earth, the overlying rock crust opened up like a rip in a tightly stretched cloth. The subterranean water was under extreme pressure because of the weight of the 60 miles of rock pressing down on it. So the water exploded violently out of this rupture. All along the globe-encircling crack, fountains of water jetted supersonically into and far above the atmosphere. The spray from this enormous fountain produced torrential rain such as the Earth has never experienced before or after. The Bible states that all the fountains of the great deep burst open on one day, and it describes these events about 5,000 years ago that we can now tie together scientifically in cause and effect order. Some of the water, jetting high above the stratosphere, froze into supercooled ice crystals and produced massive ice dumps, burying, suffocating, and instantly freezing many animals, including the frozen mammoths of Siberia and Alaska. The high-pressure fountains eroded the crumbling rock on both sides of the crack, producing huge volumes of sediments that settled out of this muddy water all over the Earth. These sediments trapped and quickly buried plants and animals, forming the fossil record.
Yeah, again, that's just a small animation. There's more. But I want to emphasize one thing, because how does glycine, dozens of other complex organic molecules and stuff get into space? And think about this: when that crack ruptured, and that crack would have ruptured and instantly gone, X number of miles wide because of the stretching, and it just pops open. And as it's blowing up that 60 miles and taking vegetation, animals, people if they're there, everything that's organic, and it would have been accelerated. Some of it at the very beginning would have been the extreme pulse that sent the stuff that was really going out there. It would have accelerated at from 0 to 7 miles a second. You know what would happen to you if you got accelerated into 7 miles a second? You would be little bits of glycine floating in space. You would not. Nathaniel here, he's told me about the suicide intersection they have over there, where people just decide to go into a Jersey barrier. They do that at 80 miles an hour, and they're not feeling too good. Imagine, because they go from 80 to 0, and going from 0 to 7 miles a second is a little bit more than, it's 25,000 miles an hour. So it's like you go from 0 to 25,000 miles an hour, bam. So, but you would expect to find organics in space. And that's what Dr. Brown predicted. So it was a cataclysmic event. It's a miracle that 8 people survived in a boat. So what I want to make clear is it didn't shoot out, we didn't jettison the Vil-2 comet or the asteroid or Pluto. The top one is Pluto. That's not what got jettisoned. What got jettisoned is the material. The material's going out there. And I was going to take time on this, and I'm just going to only say the origin of Earth's radioactivity is tied up to what happens here with these electrical surges and Z-pinch. They call it Z-pinch. But as the crust fluttered, it would have created pulses. As the crust would have fluttered at the neck of the rupture and touched down on the mantle, it would have stopped the water and then exploded into a pulse that would have been able to go extreme velocities from Earth. And I'm not going to take the time because I realize I'm out of time. And so here's a pulse that we're seeing here. And it sends out debris at the same velocity, made of water and debris. And when it gets out to space, what it wants to do is it's everybody's a neighbor in space. You've seen those space programs, and the boyfriend or the girlfriend is just a few feet away, and you can't get to them because we're going in a different velocity, but if they're going at the exact same speed, even though they're far apart, because they can't swim, there's no air to divert yourself. But this guy's gravity and this girl's gravity are going to bring them together. And so this stuff that's being ejected would want to, over time, and with moisture that's around them to slow down their relative speeds, it would congregate very lightly as what we now know as comets. And this is 67P. This is the Rosetta space program, the spacecraft that went up and to go land on the Rosetta after Stardust. Oh, by the way, many inconceivables on this. Many inconceivables, which were not inconceivable to Walt Brown. He predicted everything they found. And by the way, we have a statement that people that follow hydroplate theory, all scientists work for Dr. Brown. In every field, whether it's origin of Earth's radioactivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they all work for Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory because what they find is consistent with the hydroplate theory and contrary to what they were premising on their own. So the water is ejected, and this is just showing how 40 days and 40 nights of rain, but not all of it came back as rain. This is the little shot. It's not a big pulse comes back as rain. Cannon shooting straight up from the Earth, and this is the gravity well of Earth. Shoots a little bit further, goes up, gets super cooled up in the atmosphere of space, freezes the carbon dioxide into dry ice, comes back down, buries mammoths, eating tropical vegetation in their mouth is still there, freezes them to 150 below zero, surrounds them with 150 below zero because it cools off the outside of their body to the point where their stomach contents don't even rot. And so it buries them with this super cold stuff because some of it went up but see, you shoot straight up to space, it wants to come back. And But if you shoot it straight up into space at 7 miles a second, it's gone. It's now going to fall into the sun's gravitational sphere of influence, and now it's left the Earth, and now it's going around the sun in various elliptical orbits. So then it leaves our gravity well, turns into the sun's gravity well, and now it's in elliptical orbits around the sun. So comet orbits, this is, they have various different energies. See, some of the short period comets that are just, they don't go out with much energy, they stay inside of our solar system. They only get to Jupiter. But others go way out there and some are coming back for the first time in 5,000 years. So, lots of comets. No new comets added to the solar system. They've never seen a new comet come in, but many comets are dying, meaning they were formed recently. And I was going to get into more on this, but see the red? That's the number of comets. Down there on the bottom scale is AUs. AU is astronomical units. An astronomical unit is the distance between the sun and Earth. So by definition, the Earth is 1 AU away from the sun. Well, Jupiter is about 5. And so you have a high percentage of the low energy comets whose farthest away that they get from the sun, called aphelion, is right at close to Jupiter's orbit. And the reason for that is because they were birthed inside the solar system, and the ones that were low energy, they've been around, they come back often enough that when Jupiter could be by, and Jupiter's gravity is going to start sucking them into their family. But it's like a black widow. Let me suck you into my web so I can kill you. Because, black widow female wants to bring in the guy to kill him. You know that, right? Yep. So the Comet A had more energy, it had enough energy to take its orbit, its elliptical orbit, aphelion, past Jupiter's orbit. But every once in a while, Jupiter's close enough that it wants to suck that asteroid closer in. And the B orbit was not quite as much energy as what was necessary, and Jupiter's going to try and suck that back out to itself to kill it. In both cases, kill it. And look at Jupiter, look at the top of your screen there, Shoemaker-Levy 9. That was a comet, went by Jupiter, and Jupiter ripped it apart because, again, it was all that debris that just came together. Doesn't have glue, it's just loosely packed together. So when it got close to Jupiter, Jupiter ripped it apart. Then all that debris went around the sun again, came back to Jupiter and got eaten up. So if no new comets are being added to the solar system, and many are being destroyed by large planets, then comets are recently produced and were formed at the same time. Does everybody understand that? Only the Hydroplate Theory can explain this. Only young Earth creationists can explain it. That we were not created a long time ago, and there was a cataclysm that sent stuff up into space, became comets and asteroids are being chewed up, and they would all be gone. All the short periods are going to be gone in 10,000 years. All the Jupiter family will be gone in 10,000 years. Origin of the asteroid belt, how come, I said everything goes in elliptical orbits, well, how did it circularize? I tried to explain this on Sunday night last week. Give it up. Watch Brian Nichols' YouTube teaching on asteroids. So I am teachable. So go Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, Nickel, N-I-C-K-E-L. Go to YouTube, Brian Nichols' channel, and you'll get he's a mechanical engineer, worked with Raytheon when he was doing a lot of these. He now is an inventor and engineer for a company in Montana now. Extremely brilliant, really put together great animations, but even then, you better have some college-level orbital physics or you're going to still struggle. So, takeaways, comet asteroids are not part of God's good creation about 6,000 years ago, but they are here now, have impacted the Earth before, and according to the Bible prophecy, are going to impact the Earth again. Those who reject biblical creation and the flood manufacture fairy tales in an attempt to explain objects in our solar system. When you don't have the truth, You have to invent something, They're there, how did they come? Well, we'll give it our best shot. And it doesn't make any sense. But we can sit there, yes, we're there, and they're there, and we know how they came, and we know what's happening, and we can have great faith. I mean, the hydroplate theory is, I had faith in Jesus. I was going to die and go to heaven without this understanding. But I was going to have questions. I was going to say, man, how did the earth get flooded? And I don't want some equivalent to evolutionary fairy tales. I want to know something that makes sense, that can be supported by the facts. I don't want to just believe it because I believe it. I want to know. And God gave us a gift in Dr. Brown to figure this out. But the biblical Christian can have an answer that is consistent with the Bible and science and use that knowledge to reject deception, they're lying to me, and to witness to others, even Dr. Brownlee. And so then we're going to conclude, and I am running a little bit late. But just conclude, my first interaction with him was I was meeting with an astronomy professor at Olympic College, and I was actually having a debate with him. And I mentioned to him, Stardust is going to show you guys wrong, because it hadn't even, it was just scooping up, it had just got to the comet to scoop up the comet tail dust. They're going to show that you're wrong. And he goes, oh, Dr. Brownlee, I know him. You should contact him. So I did. I wrote him. And I told him, Dr. Brown's predictions about Mars, finding salt water on Mars, have been proven to be true, which was inconceivable. And there's other predictions that are going to affect your space probe mission that you ought to read his material. He never answered. Then, in March 2006, this is after they found all the shocking stuff, articles came out, NASA throws space experts. Mineral traces in Stardust samples upset long-held assumptions about origins of comets from the Houston Chronicle. Comet from coldest spot in the solar system has material from the hottest places, University of Washington. Celestial dust challenges basic view of comets by Sandy Dutton from the Seattle Times. I talked to her on the phone, and as soon as she knew I was a creationist, okay, goodbye. Today, and then this article is amazing. Stardust shatters comet theory, March 16, 2006, by thunderbolts.info. Today, the study of comets has reached a crisis. Every key finding comes as a surprise. Inconceivable. But no one seems to realize that the surprises are not random. They are predictable. And we can predict. Oh, you want to you're going to go try and find something to support the Big Bang Theory? Let me tell you something. I'm going to predict something. You're going to find out you're wrong. Predictable under the different perspective. A tragedy is the way inertia can leave well-intentioned scientists with their feet in the sand. The momentum of prior belief, working in concert with pressing demands of funding, creates nearly endless obstructions to open-minded exploration and discourse. Even a brief vacation from an oppressive paradigm could do wonders. Isn't that something? That was a masterful use of words there. You guys are wrong. You got to get out of your paradigm and go find out, listen to somebody else. And so I was in the audience on April 29, 2006, when Dr. Brownlee gave a public lecture at the University of Washington about the Stardust findings. He discussed the shocking and unexpected findings of their mission. After the lecture, I talked with Dr. Brownlee and gave him a copy of Dr. Brown's Comet chapter and the email Dr. Brown sent to Dee and I the day before the Stardust Probe landed, where he predicted what they would be found when they opened the capsule. So here's it. You just got done telling everybody, me included, that you're shocked with all the things that you're finding. Well, Dr. Brown wasn't shocked, and here's his chapter. He took the material and said he would read it. A couple of weeks later, in a phone conversation, he said he would not finish reading because he knew Dr. Brown had to be wrong. He got into it long enough. Well, we know this isn't the way comets were born. August 18, 2009, after a news media, this is 3 years later, after the news media went public with the fact glycine was also found on Stardust Probe, I called Dr. Brownlee. Summary of the phone call, I reminded Dr. Brownlee that I was the one who gave him Dr. Brown's Comet chapter and predictions after his lecture at the University of Washington on April 29, 2006. I also said I was the one who asked him the question of whether they had found organic molecules. I was able to ask a question during his presentation at UW. Hey, have you found any organic molecules? Which he didn't specifically answer. He replied that he remembered me. I told him the reason that I was calling was because of the recent news that I had just read the day before, that they found the amino acid glycine on Stardust and wanted to hear from him what he thought. He admitted that he was totally shocked by this discovery. I was really impressed with his humility, and he was just respectful, humble. I'm not going to give a party line, oh yeah, we expected this. He was honest. I then reminded him that he had rejected the idea of reading Dr. Brown's work because he knew that Dr. Brown was wrong, and then stated that Dr. Brown's theory on the origin of comets would predict that they would have found glycine. I said that everything that he, Brownlee, and other comet scientists are finding are perfectly consistent with the idea that comets formed as a result of debris which was rejected from the Earth. And like I said earlier, he didn't hang up on me. He didn't say, what is this nutcase? You got to be kidding me. He didn't do that. He did not balk at this statement and instead let me continue. I then admitted to him that the idea seems preposterous because it is hard to imagine that there was a point in Earth's history where there was an event with enough energy to eject large amounts of crustal material and water from the Earth at escape velocity, but that Dr. Brown's theory included how this event happened and where the energy came from, and it does. I then also admitted that Dr. Brown's theory is way outside the paradigm box that the entire world is sold on, but that he should at least take the time to read Dr. Brown's ideas, even if it's under his bed sheets at night. And I literally told him that. I said, you're finding all this stuff wrong, and Dr. Brown is not surprised at all, and neither are any of us. You really should read it. Even if you don't want to be caught by anybody reading a creationist book, do it under your bed sheets at night. The conversation was about 10-15 minutes long. He listened and discussed with professional respect, and at the end of our discussion, he asked me to again tell him what Dr. Brown's website address was. So the emphasis of this is they don't have the truth. And the honest ones know they don't have the truth. Evolution's a lie. The Big Bang's a lie. The truth is we were created by God. The truth is there was a cataclysmic flood that destroyed the earth and caused other things to happen. I sent more letters to Dr. Brownlee that were not answered. On February 20th, that recent finds on Comet 67P were shocking to the evolutionists, but not to those that followed the Hydroplate Theory. And then this is the one that's, and then with the increased spending on near-Earth asteroid detection and deflection, he should again consider Dr. Brown's work. Hey, you're probably in on the discussion of how we're going to go find and deflect these things. You better find out what they're made of from Dr. Brown's theory, because it's going to affect how your space missions work. He never answered that one either. So, for this, they willfully forget. And so now they reject this. And that's what the Bible predicts in Peter. This is 2 Peter chapter 3. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water. The earth is coming up out of water underneath the crust. And in the water, standing in the water, it's out of the water, in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with that water. So everybody understand, right there, Peter's telling us that the Hydroplate Theory is true. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire. You know what's going to happen if an asteroid really hits this earth and crashes in and breaks the crust and gets the global earthquake going that we talked about in our earthquake study, and that's on our YouTube channel? And the fires and the volcanoes that are going to be going off and creating cataclysms, every wall on the earth falling down, every island fleeing away, every mountain being moved, is what the Bible says. Until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. God brought judgment for the flood of Noah's days, and he's going to bring the judgment again for the last days as men. Is the world going towards wickedness? But beloved, do not forget this one thing, because we want him to come back the day we get saved. That's what, right? The day I got saved, why didn't you come back and take me, right? That's when the end time should happen. That with the Lord, one day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years a day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. He's waiting for us to come to repentance. And, we'll cut this off at the rest. Dee and I are working on getting another conversation with Dr. Brownlee. She has gotten in contact with Dr. Brownlee. She's thinking of inviting him to Zoom in on this on Tuesday. And I'll welcome him to do so. And hey, we have somebody in the audience that's going to quality control check me. And so we're hoping to do that because she thinks he's open. And see, the thing is, armed with the Bible's the truth, and I know it. I don't have to just, check my brain. It's the truth. It's the way it happened. This is the God of the universe that wrote this for us through the prophets and the apostles, and we trust him, and he saved us from sin. And just go out with that boldness because we are right. And go out with the boldness to tell people, you better get on the ark. The first one was the flood, and nobody wanted to get on Noah's boat because he was a Looney Tune. Well, now we're telling you there's judgment coming, and you can think I'm crazy, but you better get into Jesus, because if you're not on the Jesus boat when judgment comes, then you're left behind. And this day is coming. And that's why I've gotten so much into this, is it's so exciting to know that we know the truth. I already knew it the day I got saved, but it's nice to add to that the information that helps us really appreciate that. Father, we thank you for your word. We do pray for those that are lost and deceived by the deceptions that are just so rampant in our world today. Deceptions of how we came about, how the universe came about, how, just everything, Lord, the deceptions are rampant. And we just pray, by the power of your Holy Spirit, Lord, you would equip us to be bold and hold on to the truth and be an ambassador for you as we decide to just serve you until you come to take us home, because you're long-suffering, Lord. We want to be long-suffering too, and just with a passion for those that are lost. In Jesus' name, amen.
Ooh, you're glorious, yeah. Is your name in all the